Lady of Fatima, the feast of Our Lady of Fatima, the 13th of May, one of the liturgical celebrations honouring Mary in a whole month of devotion to her, the month of May. Most saints' days traditionally are observed, the date is observed on the anniversary of the death of the saint. But there are numerous exceptions, and this particular feast will be one of them, Our Lady of Fatima. Why do we keep the feast on the 13th of May? It's because of a different kind of event. That is, of a miraculous experience of three children just over 100 years ago, 1917, in central Portugal in Fatima. The 13th of May of that year, in which three children, close relatives, Lucia Santos, Francisco Mato and his sister Jacinta, three cousins, were looking after some sheep in a rural setting, and suddenly they had a vision of a woman in white, dazzling like the sun, who spoke to them, and who, over the course of months, they would come to realise and know as none other than the person of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus. The visions of Fatima, the first of which is therefore commemorated on the liturgical feast associated with the title, is a very significant moment in the history of the Church and indeed of the world in the 20th century. It's good to think for a moment of the historical context of this feast, or what it commemorates. 1917, in the middle of the First World War, Mary chose to reveal herself to these three children, to give them a message of peace and of hope, just as the world was experiencing one of the greatest conflagrations, and also an experience, a very sorrowful experience of so many, many deaths and pain, bereavement, sorrow. At this moment in the history of the 20th century, Mary chose to appear to these three young children. Secondly, the visions came on the cusp, we could say, of the communist revolution, the October Revolution in that year in Russia, which was to herald the dominance or the presence and growth of Marxist communism in that century, which was to have such a decisive impact upon world affairs. Communism, of course, so deeply opposed to our Christian and our Catholic faith. The context then teaches us something. This is the moment at which Mary chose to arrive and to speak to these three children, and to reaffirm to them the truths taught by Christ, her Son. The message of Our Lady of Fatima has numerous aspects. Of course, one, perhaps we may say the most famous part of the Fatima visions, was that of the three secrets which were given to the children in the month of July, because Mary showed herself to the children each month between May and October of that year. Most of the months on the 13th of the month. August was a little bit different. The July vision, the 13th of July, Mary revealed to the children three extraordinary visions pertaining to the Catholic faith. The first one, a vision of the sufferings of the souls in hell. She spoke to them about a consecration that she desired of Russia to her Immaculate Heart. And she also affirmed and encouraged the practice of the first Saturdays, the communions of reparation, in her honour and in honour of her Son. The third secret, the best known, was a vision of the persecution that the Church would experience in the future. A persecution that would involve the person of the Pope, and which St. John Paul II later understood to be a prediction of the assassination attempt of him himself on the 13th of May 1981 in St. Peter's Square. But the revelation of persecution, the third secret, which was revealed only in more recent times, has a broader application also than that. Central also to the message of Our Lady of Fatima is that of the practice of penance, to which Mary particularly invited and commanded those who the children and those who through the children would hear her message to heed and to observe penance. The works, principally, those we associate with Lent, prayer, fasting and almsgiving, works which bring about in us, by the operation of God's grace, conversion of heart, and unite us more deeply to the heart of Christ, the Son of Mary. Mary in the visions emphasised that these practices done in the spirit of faith and of love are truly powerful and occasions of grace within the soul of the one who does them. Mary also encouraged prayer for the conversion of sinners. That was also a key feature of the message. And that encourages us to pray, first of all, for ourselves, who are sinners, and also for all those who, at times perhaps not knowing it, are offending God by their actions or even by their inaction. The feast of Our Lady of Fatima, the memorial of Our Lady of Fatima, perhaps has a special significance for us this year, in which most, all of us, are affected by the coronavirus pandemic, and in which so many of us, here in our own parish, we know, are unable to attend Mass or actually come to the church. Because Mary's message of penance speaks to us, even separated from the physical building of the church and participation in the sacraments. Prayer, fasting and almsgiving we can do without coming to church in different ways. And the feast, the memorial, reminds us, listening to the words of Mary, that the church has many spiritual weapons in her armoury. And of these, there are many that we can still practice at home or wherever we are, calling down graces upon ourselves, but also upon others. In fact, among forms of prayer, in the visions of Fatima, the Rosary was the specific devotion to which Mary encouraged the children, inviting, indeed, admonishing them each day to pray the Rosary. And in this month of May, the whole month dedicated to the Blessed Virgin, what more powerful invitation could we ourselves receive from our Blessed Mother to pray the Rosary every day? This will must have wonderful spiritual fruits if we are faithful to it as a devotional practice. Perhaps lastly, here at St. Bernadette's, we should also reflect that our own patron was herself a visionary. And for that reason, the feast pertaining to another set of Marian apparitions, actually about 60 years later, in Portugal, rather than in the 1850s, 1858 in France, when St. Bernadette saw our Blessed Mother, also perhaps invites us to a deeper appreciation of the value of these visions and of the message and of the truth and of the core that Mary presents to each one of us. Cardinal Ratzinger, who later became Pope Benedict XVI, wrote an analysis or reflection about the Fatima visions, and particularly about the Three Secrets, which was published in the year 2000. And in that analysis that he wrote, he said at one point, let me add a personal reflection. When I myself met Sister Lucia, because one of the Fatima visionaries lived much longer than the others, even into modern times, and became a religious sister, Pope Benedict XVI and others still living met and knew her. He said, when I met Sister Lucia, she emphasised to me that the whole meaning and thrust of the visions was to lead Christians to a growth in the virtues of faith and of hope and of charity. And perhaps that's the message that we ourselves can take today in a time in which we desire to grow in those virtues, the faith which conquers this world, the hope which reaches amidst the suffering of this world into heaven, and the charity which, as St. Paul says, the charity of Christ, which can conquer all things. Let's pray, then ask that this most holy Virgin may lead us forward, may root us by her prayers, example and spiritual presence, root us more deeply in the gospel and in the teaching of Christ her Son. Make us more fervent and trusting members of the Church, and in this way lead us forward each day in that spirit of prayer, penance and devotion which she exemplifies in her life and in her words.